I was paid to keep quiet about the night they replaced Beyoncé. It sounds insane, right? But what if I told you it's true? What if I told you that the woman the world cheers for now isn't who you think she is? That night, I saw the real Beyoncé, and she was locked away, replaced by someone else. The world was kept in the dark, and I was forced to pretend like I didn't know. What I saw still haunts me, and I've never been able to shake the feeling that I'm being watched. It's time to tell you the truth. I can't believe I'm saying this, but here it goes. I was there the night they replaced Beyoncé. You won't believe me. I know that. I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But it happened, and I can't keep this inside anymore. I should have said something years ago, but I didn't, because I was scared, terrified of what might happen if I did. But now it's eating me up inside. I've kept this secret for so long, locked away in the deepest parts of me, but the guilt, it won't go away. I can't pretend I don't know what I know. I can't pretend I didn't see the things I saw. The world thinks they know Beyoncé, right? They see her on stage, the perfect image, flawless and untouchable. They don't see what I saw. They don't know what I know. I can't even begin to describe it, but I'll try. I was just a small part of the crew that night, nothing special, just another person behind the scenes, doing what I was told. But there was something in the air that night that felt different. You know, when you walk into a room and you just feel it, like there's something wrong, but you can't put your finger on it? Yeah, that's how it felt. It was late, way past midnight, and the rehearsal was supposed to be over. I'd seen the same people, heard the same voices every night, but tonight, there was a tension that I couldn't shake. The lights were low, casting shadows all over the hall. People were whispering in corners, staff members eyeing each other nervously. The security guards were everywhere, more than usual. And I remember thinking how strange it was that we weren't even allowed to have our phones out. It wasn't anything new. There was always a strict no phones rule. But that night, the air felt suffocating, like something was coming. Something that was about to change everything. Then she walked in. It wasn't even a grand entrance, just another part of the night's schedule, another hour of rehearsal. But when I saw her, when I saw Beyoncé, I knew something wasn't right. She looked like her, sure. She had the same curves, the same golden glow. She moved the way she always did, but something was missing. Her eyes, they were cold. Too cold. It was like she wasn't even there. But everyone around me didn't seem to notice. They were all too busy doing their jobs, keeping things running smoothly. But not me. I couldn't stop staring at her. I couldn't shake that feeling that this wasn't her. Not completely. She didn't feel like Beyoncé. The energy wasn't the same. It was almost robotic. The way she smiled, the way she moved, it was too perfect, too rehearsed. There were moments when she'd stop just for a second, like she was trying to remember what she was supposed to do next. And that was when I first thought, this is wrong, but I didn't say anything. There were always rumors, you know, talk backstage about how she was too big to be real anymore, that she had to be protected, that she couldn't be touched, that she couldn't be broken, but she wasn't the same. But those were just whispers. No one took them seriously. At least I didn't. Until that night, I remember the moment so clearly. She looked right at me, her eyes locked onto mine for just a second. And in that moment, I swear I saw something different, something other. It was like I wasn't seeing her at all. I was seeing something pretending to be her, but it wasn't her. I blinked, and she was back to performing. Perfect again. But I couldn't unsee it. That coldness, that distance, it stayed with me. And then, that's when the whispers started. Quiet at first, but then louder. They were in the hallways, behind closed doors in the shadows, staff members talking, hushed voices, but I could hear the words clearly. "She's not her," one of them said. "Who?" I asked, trying to stay casual, trying to play it off like I didn't know what they meant. But I already did. "She's not her. The real one. She's gone." And for a moment, I thought I might be losing my mind. I thought maybe I was hearing things, maybe I was overreacting. But no, I could feel it. Something was wrong. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't crazy. The real Beyoncé, she was gone. Replaced. I followed them. I shouldn't have, but I did. I followed the crew members down a hallway, past doors I wasn't supposed to go near. They looked at me like they knew I wasn't supposed to be there, but they didn't stop me. They couldn't, not without making things worse. And then I saw it. The real Beyoncé. She wasn't on stage anymore. She wasn't the woman everyone adored. She wasn't the one who dazzled the world. She was different. She was sitting in a dark room, almost lifeless, her body slumped in a chair. There were people surrounding her, men in suits, all standing guard, watching her. But they weren't protecting her. They were containing her. She wasn't free. She was trapped. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a look-alike or some stunt. This was real. They had replaced her. The woman the world knew as Beyoncé, she was gone, locked away. And in her place, a new version stood on that stage. The one who smiled, who danced, who waved her hands like nothing had changed. But everything had. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand it. But I knew one thing. The truth was dangerous. And I wasn't supposed to know it. But now I can't keep it inside anymore. Because what happened that night, it wasn't just some Hollywood rumor. It wasn't a lie. The woman you see on stage, she's not Beyoncé. And no one will ever know the truth. What happens next? I'll tell you. You need to hear it. The door creaked as I stepped into the room. A soft, almost inviting sound that seemed too delicate for the weight of what I was about to witness. I wasn't supposed to be here, but the moment I entered, it felt as if I had walked into a dream. A strange, unsettling kind of dream. It was nothing like the chaos of the rehearsal rooms, nothing like the clamor of 1,000 hands busy with lights, sound, and costumes. This place was different, silent, too quiet. The lights were dim, but not in a way that suggested something was wrong. No, it was deliberate, soft, calming. A warm golden glow settled over the room, making everything seem almost too polished, too pristine. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something sweeter, like vanilla, but too faint, like it was trying too hard to smell comforting. It hung in the air, in an almost artificial way. The kind of air freshener scent you buy from a store because it's supposed to make you feel relaxed. I looked around. The room was large, circular, its walls painted in soft hues of beige and gold. There were no windows, only smooth, flawless surfaces like the world outside had been erased, leaving nothing but this perfectly contained space. It was clean, too clean. Everything in its place, every chair lined just right, every table cleared of any clutter. There was a subtle, almost obsessive neatness to the place, as if someone had arranged it with precision, a calculated perfection that felt wrong. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just overthinking it. I mean, everything seemed normal. Nothing was out of the ordinary. But something about it made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. Something that didn't quite fit, even though I couldn't name it. Maybe it was the way the lighting reflected off the sleek, polished floor, making the space feel empty, yet full. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked in further and the floor creaked slightly under my weight, a sound that echoed in the otherwise still room. I tried to ignore the way it felt, like it was too quiet, too still. The walls felt too close, almost as if they were leaning in, closing in on me. But there was a softness to it, too. The kind of softness that made you believe everything was okay, that nothing was wrong. I shook my head, trying to clear the sudden unease. I wasn't here to think about that. I was here to do my job, that was all. But as I moved further into the space, I couldn't help but notice the strange emptiness. The kind that lingered even with everything in its place, even with the warm light, the smell of vanilla. Everything felt off. I paused near a small round table in the center where a glass of water sat untouched. The condensation on the side seemed to shimmer in the low light, but there was something unsettling about it too. The glass was placed precisely in the center of the table, as though someone had set it there with extreme care. There was no drink left behind, no fingerprints on the edges. The water, clear and still, reflected the light in a way that made it seem almost unnatural. There was something about the space that made me feel watched, even though I couldn't quite figure out where the eyes were. The walls were smooth, empty of any pictures or windows, yet I felt them all around me, closing in, just a little. I told myself it was nothing, just the isolation of the room, just the quiet. But I couldn't ignore the sensation that the silence was waiting for something. It was like the air itself was holding its breath. I took a few steps forward, my shoes tapping softly on the floor, the sound faint against the silence. There was a moment where I thought I could hear something else, a faint noise, a movement. But when I turned, nothing was there. Nothing at all. Just the glass, sitting there on the table, its silence loud in the room. I felt my pulse quicken. There was an instinct in me that told me I wasn't alone here, that there was something, someone, hidden, waiting just beyond the threshold of my awareness. But every time I tried to place it, it slipped away. It was as though the room itself was alive, a living, breathing thing that didn't want me to understand it. I stepped closer to the table, my hand brushing against the back of the chair as I moved. I could hear my breath in my ears, sharp, loud, but it didn't sound like my breath. It sounded wrong, too shallow, too quick. I glanced at the clock on the far wall, noting the time as it ticked away in the silence. Tick, tick. The quiet was unbearable, but the clock, it was too loud. Each tick louder than the last. Each second stretching on, dragging, as if the world was waiting for something, waiting for me to notice. I glanced around again. But this time, I saw it. A movement. At first, I thought it was a shadow, just the flicker of light playing tricks on me, but then it moved again. A figure. So subtle, so quiet that I could have sworn it wasn't there at all. I froze, staring into the empty corner where the figure had been. But the longer I looked, the more I began to question what I had seen. Was it really there? Had I imagined it? I took another step forward, unsure of whether I wanted to confirm what I thought I'd seen. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't just in my mind. It was real, and it was growing. The silence was no longer just empty. It was filled with something, a presence I couldn't name. It was watching me, waiting for me to see it, to understand. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. There was something in the back of my mind that warned me not to. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the unease began to fade, as if it had been nothing but a figment of my imagination. I blinked and looked around, but now, the room was completely still. Too still. The atmosphere, once filled with a palpable sense of waiting, was now unnaturally quiet. The air had shifted. Something had changed, but I wasn't sure when. I wanted to leave. I needed to leave. But something held me in place. Something inside me telling me to stay, to wait just a little longer, as if I was about to witness something I couldn't walk away from. I turned slowly, moving toward the door, but before I could even reach for the handle, I felt a sudden shift in the air. It was small, almost imperceptible, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I knew something was wrong. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but I had the sinking feeling that I wasn't supposed to be here, not anymore. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence press down on me, I realized I couldn't leave. Not until I understood what was waiting for me. And the room, so carefully constructed, so perfectly maintained, felt more like a trap than a sanctuary. I stepped further into the space, scanning the room for something familiar, but nothing felt right. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Large, with high ceilings that gave an impression of openness, soft amber lighting, and carefully arranged tables and chairs. The hum of the air conditioning should have been comforting, but it only made the room feel unnervingly sterile. But then I saw him, a guest I didn't recognize, leaning against the far wall. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and something about the way he looked at me made my stomach knot. It wasn't a friendly glance, nor was it overtly hostile. It felt like a warning, like he could see something inside me that I wasn't supposed to reveal. Then he turned, vanishing into the crowd. My pulse quickened, and I tried to shake off the unease, but it lingered, crawling along my spine like ice. I forced myself to move, to focus on my task. But then, near the corner of the room, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It was plain, unmarked, and the polished surface reflected the dim lights in an unnatural way. The handle gleamed, but the door was locked. I paused, glancing at it more closely than I normally would. It shouldn't have stood out, but it did. It felt like a barrier, a thing meant to be hidden, and my chest tightened at the thought of what could be behind it. The room began to feel smaller, the air shifting. There was a faint metallic scent that hadn't been there before. sharp and sterile, like something had been disturbed. I swallowed hard, trying to stay focused, but that's when I noticed the staff. They moved too smoothly, too deliberately. One assistant brushed past me, her movements precise, almost rehearsed, and her eyes didn't meet mine. Another bent over to pick up a piece of equipment, but when she straightened, she seemed to forget how to breathe for a moment, her posture stiffening suddenly. Conversations were clipped, polite, mechanical, like every word had been rehearsed. It was as if no one was really here. Even the figure I thought was Beyoncé wasn't herself. She moved with grace, but there was something off. Her gestures were stiff, a delay before she responded to anyone. Her eyes, once full of warmth, now felt distant, almost calculating. Occasionally, she'd glance past the room, her gaze hollow. It wasn't the same. There was no real connection, just a shell, a perfect mask. I tried to ground myself, to focus on the environment. The glass on the table had a small smudge, a fingerprint left unnoticed by everyone but me. A light flickered above, just near the locked door, casting shifting shadows. The temperature fluctuated subtly, warm one moment, cool the next. It was like the room was alive, adjusting itself to my discomfort. As I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, I felt a strange vibration beneath me, like the room itself was pulsing, a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm. I tried to shake it off, but it didn't go away. I glanced around, noticing how the floor reflected the light almost liquidly. The shadows seemed to move independently, stretching in unnatural ways. The sound of footsteps echoed, not my own, from corners I couldn't see. A chair shifted slightly, even though no one had touched it, and a curtain fluttered though the windows were shut. It was like the room was designed to make me doubt what I was seeing. I knew something wasn't right, but the more I tried to deny it, the more it became impossible to ignore. The tension in the air thickened, like static before a storm. My hands shook, my legs felt heavier with each step. I tried to push it all away, but the unease only grew. The locked door, the strange behavior of the staff, the distorted figure of Beyoncé. All these little details connected in my mind, building into something I couldn't escape. The figure, the one I'd been watching, the one who looked like Beyoncé, glanced at me again. Her movements were so precise, too perfect, and for a split second her eyes met mine. There was nothing human in them. No recognition, no warmth. Just cold, empty calculation. It was like she wasn't seeing me. She was measuring me, evaluating me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew I wasn't supposed to be here. As I stood there, unable to move, a low hum vibrated beneath my feet. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, the sound vibrating through my bones. I tried to steady myself, but the air around me thickened, pressing in on all sides. The shadows stretched again, and the room seemed to bend, its edges warping as though reality itself was starting to unravel. I froze, terrified, and yet unable to look away. And then the hum stopped. Everything went quiet. The room was still, but the silence felt suffocating, like the calm before a storm. I wanted to leave, to run, but something deep inside me kept me rooted to the spot. I was no longer just a spectator. I was part of whatever was unfolding here, and I couldn't escape it. I had seen enough now to know that what lay behind that locked door was far worse than I could imagine. I wanted to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. I was trapped, locked in a room that had become a cage, surrounded by people who weren't people at all. The tension grew unbearable, pressing on my chest, and I realized, with a sickening certainty, that I had just crossed the line. Whatever I had uncovered here, whatever truth I had stumbled upon, it was no longer something I could walk away from. I wasn't just stuck in this room, I was trapped in something far darker. The door behind me rattled, a faint sound, almost like a warning. Something, or someone, was still out there, waiting, watching. And as I turned to face the locked door, the coldness settled in my gut, and I realized, with chilling clarity, that whatever waited for me beyond it was about to change everything. I wasn't ready for it, but I knew I would never escape. Not now, not anymore. I stepped back from the locked door, my pulse still racing from the strange glimpses I'd caught in the last room. At first, I told myself it was nerves, that my imagination was twisting the shadows into something they weren't. But as I stood there, the air seemed to shift around me, thickening, pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. I realized then that whatever was happening here wasn't just odd. It was deliberate, and it was far darker than I had dared to imagine. I tried to steady my breathing, but each inhale felt shallow, each exhale heavier than the last. My eyes roamed the space, searching for something concrete, something to reassure me. The room felt the same, yet everything had changed. The light was too steady now, too artificial, casting a glow that made every surface gleam unnaturally. It reflected off the polished floors and the smooth walls in a way that made the shadows twitch at the edges of my vision. I rubbed my eyes, hoping to dispel the unease, but the feeling only grew, settling deep into my bones like ice. Then I noticed it, a small, almost imperceptible movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but nothing was there. Nothing should have been. The chairs were still, the tables untouched, and the air held only the faint hum of the ventilation system. And yet, I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of something shifting as if the room itself was breathing around me. My stomach churned, and I swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear coating my tongue. I took a tentative step forward and the hairs on my neck bristled. There was a faint click somewhere behind me, soft, deliberate. I spun around, but again, nothing was out of place. The door to the locked room loomed silently at the far end, smooth and unyielding. Yet I felt its presence like a hand pressing on my chest. Something about that door, its very existence, screamed at me that the world I thought I knew was unraveling. I tried to focus on something familiar, anything to ground myself. The figure I had assumed was Beyoncé, or the replacement I wasn't sure anymore, was standing a few feet away, perfectly still. Her movements, when she did turn or gesture, were precise, almost mechanical, but there was an edge to them, a sharpness that made me flinch. She smiled at someone across the room, and it was the kind of smile that felt rehearsed, drilled into her, devoid of warmth. My stomach twisted at the realization that this wasn't the person I had worked with before. Something was off. So off that my chest tightened at every glance, every shift in her stance. A staff member walked past me, her steps deliberate, her eyes cast downward as if afraid to meet mine. She carried a small tray, balancing it perfectly, but her hands trembled ever so slightly. I noticed the subtle shaking because I was hyper-aware now, waiting for the impossible to reveal itself. When she set the tray down and turned, her gaze flicked toward the locked door, fleeting and hurried, like she had seen me notice her noticing. The moment passed, but the unease lingered, seeping into every corner of my mind. Then the unexplainable happened. It started small, a slight shimmer in the air, like heat rising off pavement on a hot day. But it wasn't heat. The shimmer grew, distorting the edges of the room, bending light in a way that made the walls ripple. I blinked rapidly, convinced my eyes were deceiving me, but the distortion persisted. It moved like a wave, spreading across the room toward me, and with it came a low hum, resonant and vibrating. So subtle at first, I thought it was the air conditioning, but the hum deepened, threading itself into my bones, vibrating along my skull in a way that made my teeth ache. My breath caught. The floor beneath me seemed to shift, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that I felt my footing waver. I reached out instinctively to steady myself against the table, but when I touched it, the surface felt unnervingly warm, pulsating like a living thing. My fingers tingled from the contact, a faint electric buzz that ran up my arm and left my muscles trembling. I recoiled, stepping back, heart hammering. This wasn't normal. None of it made sense. I turned to look at the figure again, and for the first time, she moved in a way that froze me in place. Her head tilted at an impossible angle for just a fraction of a second, then snapped back with a fluidity that no human joint could replicate. My stomach dropped. The room had gone silent. The hum faded abruptly, leaving an oppressive stillness. And in that stillness, I felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. I could no longer deny it. Something was very wrong. I felt a shiver race up my spine, cold and electric, and it wasn't just from the chill of the air. The lights flickered again, briefly plunging the room into shadow before snapping back to their warm glow. In that instant, I caught a movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow detaching itself from the wall, moving with intention, though no one had been near it. I froze, every muscle taut. My pulse roared in my ears, each beat echoing the dread pooling in my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of light or a shadow cast by the other staff members, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Logic felt useless in this space. Every detail, from the locked door to the strange mechanical precision of the figure to the tremor in the assistant's hands, pointed to a truth I wasn't ready to face but couldn't ignore any longer. A faint click echoed somewhere deeper in the room, and I turned sharply toward it. A single door, previously unnoticed, was now slightly ajar. The space beyond it was swallowed in darkness, yet I felt it calling, drawing me closer. It wasn't merely curiosity that propelled me forward. It was an almost magnetic pull, a compulsion I couldn't resist, a whisper in the back of my mind insisting I see what lay beyond. I moved closer, my steps careful, deliberate, each one an effort against the oppressive dread that pressed from all directions. The temperature dropped suddenly, an icy draft brushing against my neck and shoulders, making my skin prickle and my breath catch. I glanced back at the figure again, and she wasn't where she had been. Not entirely. There was a shadow of her, perfectly aligned, perfectly still, as if a second presence existed in the space where she should have been. My eyes widened, pulse racing, realizing that the room was bending in ways I could not comprehend. The hum returned, low and insistent, vibrating through my bones and filling the room with a sound that was almost painful. The shadow moved again, subtly, and I noticed that my own reflection in a polished table seemed delayed, lagging behind my movements by just a fraction of a second. My throat went dry. My stomach knotted. Every instinct screamed that I needed to leave, but the compulsion to see, to know, was stronger than fear. I reached the ajar door, hesitated, then peered inside. The darkness seemed to swallow everything, yet I could make out vague shapes, tall and looming, waiting. A faint flicker of light caught movement near the far wall. Something alive, something aware. My pulse quickened, the room tilting in subtle ways, every sound amplified, every shadow stretching unnaturally. I stepped back, feeling the oppressive presence of the entire space pressing against me from all sides. Then, as I tried to regain composure, I noticed the figure again. Her eyes, no, not her eyes exactly, but something in the sockets that looked human, fixed on me. The warmth, the life I expected to see, was absent. There was recognition there, but not for me. It was awareness, calculation, cold and alien. I stumbled back a step, heart hammering, feeling trapped in a room that had suddenly transformed from a familiar workspace into a cage of living dread. And then the locked door at the far end of the room rattled, as if something inside had shifted, testing its boundary. I froze. A low, barely audible hum started again, rising in pitch, vibrating through the walls, the floor, the air itself. My skin crawled. I realized with absolute certainty that the world I had walked into was no longer normal, no longer safe. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body refused to obey. I was rooted in place, eyes darting between the ajar door, the shadow of the figure, and the locked door now quivering as if alive. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick and suffocating. I felt a presence behind me, just beyond my vision. Something unseen. Something waiting. And that's when I understood. Whatever secret this place held, whatever had been hidden and rehearsed and replaced, it was far worse than I had imagined. Far darker. And I was standing in the middle of it, exposed, helpless, and utterly aware that there was no turning back. The truth was coming, and I had no idea if I could survive what I was about to see next. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see. But something inside me pulled me forward, and before I could stop myself, I was standing at the threshold of the locked room. The door, which had been shut tightly earlier, was now slightly ajar, just enough for me to see a flicker of movement inside. My hand shook as it brushed against the handle, but when I touched it, the metal was too warm, as though it had been touched recently. I pulled back instinctively, but my body moved before my mind could catch up, drawn toward the darkness. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped suddenly. My breath fogged in front of me, and the room, bathed in an eerie, muted light, felt suffocating. The walls were lined with massive mirrors stretching from floor to ceiling, and the shadows pressed against me, thick and heavy. It felt like they were waiting to swallow me whole. But it was what I saw in the mirrors that made everything inside me freeze. At first, I thought I was seeing things. My reflection, distorted, shifting in the dim light, didn't seem like me. The eyes weren't mine. The face grinned back at me, too wide, stretching unnaturally as though pulled by invisible strings. I blinked, but it only grew wider. The smile was hollow, empty. And the worst part, the reflection didn't move the way I did. It was delayed, slow, mimicking my actions in a grotesque dance. Every movement felt wrong. I was trapped in a mirror that wasn't mine, surrounded by a version of myself I didn't recognize. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening, my heart racing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I couldn't look away. The reflection wasn't me. It was a stranger wearing my skin. Then I heard it. A whisper, faint at first, like a murmur in the distance. I spun around, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one. The room was empty, only the mirrors reflecting my shattered self. The voice came again, louder this time, crawling under my skin. It's not you anymore. I recoiled, the words ringing in my ears, drowning out everything else. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My heart hammered in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. I could feel it, the terror, physical and raw, crawling inside me. I couldn't escape the weight of it. The reflection in the mirror grinned wider, its eyes gleaming with something dark. I watched helplessly as it moved, slowly, toward the corner of the room where the shadows pooled deep. It didn't just look at me, it looked through me, like I wasn't even there. I was losing myself. My body trembled uncontrollably, but my mind was spiraling, unraveling. What was real? What had I seen? What was happening to me? I glanced around, desperate to escape, but the room had turned into a trap. A maze of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of me that didn't feel like me anymore. The walls pressed in, the mirrors distorting my reality, twisting it into something I couldn't understand. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, slow, as if I were moving through water. The whisper grew louder, closer, until it was right behind me. It's not you anymore. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room was closing in. The mirrors were warping, bending, and the reflection, it wasn't mine. It couldn't be. I turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but something stopped me. A presence, unseen but undeniable. It pressed against my chest like an invisible hand, suffocating me. Then, a door creaked open. Softly, deliberately, from behind me. Not the locked room, but the one I had been avoiding. The one I hadn't dared to open. The darkness beyond it felt alive, waiting, watching. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The door was open now, and I knew with horrifying clarity that whatever was beyond it would answer the questions I was too afraid to ask. I had to know. But as I stepped toward the door, the voice whispered again, "It's not you anymore." And for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever be the same again. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The air felt heavy, like it had turned to lead, suffocating me. My heart pounded in my chest, my body frozen, trembling uncontrollably. I had seen it. I had felt it. The door had opened, the darkness beyond swallowing everything in its path, and I knew with sickening certainty that something had been waiting for me. The shadows felt alive, pressing in, watching. My breath came shallow, ragged, but there was nothing else. No flicker of light, no hum of air, just silence. My hands shook, my legs rooted to the floor. I should have run. I should have bolted. But every muscle felt turned to stone. I was suspended in that moment, caught between reality and madness. Time itself seemed to stop, and all I could hear was my own looping thoughts. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have seen this. Then I heard it, a faint whisper. I spun around, my breath catching. But the room was empty. Only the mirrors reflected my twisted, distorted self. And there it was, the figure behind me in the reflection, the thing wearing her face. Before I realized it, I was moving. My feet carried me, stumbling, tripping, running without thought. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to escape. My body moved faster than my mind, a blur of frantic steps. Halfway to the exit, I realized the door had closed behind me. Breathless, my pulse thundering, I froze. I wasn't safe. I couldn't go back. I had seen her, or whatever that was. It wasn't her. It couldn't be. The horror wasn't in what I'd witnessed. It was in what I now knew. I had seen something that shouldn't exist, something beyond explanation. My chest tightened. My breaths came in ragged gasps, and every part of me screamed to run, to get out, to never look back. But my feet felt glued, my mind racing through the images, the sounds, the shadows. Was it real? I asked myself, but the raw fear in my gut told me it was. Then, the faintest noise again, a whisper, my name barely audible. Panic surged, my heart seized, and I scanned the room. No one was there, only me, trapped in the center of an empty, distorted space. The silence was suffocating, broken only by my own racing heartbeat. And I knew I wasn't alone. Something was here, unseen, aware, waiting for me to crack. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. My mind spiraled, unraveling. The terror crawled beneath my skin, shredding my ability to reason. I needed to leave, but my body refused. I was trapped, bound by fear and the knowledge that what I had seen was deliberate, planned. I took a shaky step toward the exit. A shadow flickered across the room. The air grew heavy, a suffocating pressure pressing on me. The shadow stretched, warped, twisting my senses until nothing felt real. Whispers grew louder, overlapping, coming from nowhere and everywhere. You can't escape. I froze, blood running cold. My eyes darted searching, but darkness closed in. "You're already trapped," whispered right next to my ear, though no one was there. I stumbled, reality crashing down. The room wasn't just a room. It was alive, aware, watching. I had to leave, but the door wouldn't open. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the handle. I pulled, twisted, pushed, harder, but it wouldn't budge. "You can't leave. You're never leaving." The words cut like blades, crushing my chest. The door felt soft, unreal, as if it resisted my touch. I stumbled back, legs weak, head spinning. The room had become impossibly vast, stretching endlessly. The walls shifted, expanded, contracted, warping as if alive. I tried to scream, but my throat betrayed me, constricted with the weight of terror. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Everything was falling apart. And then I knew. I wasn't just trapped in this room. I was trapped in this nightmare. There was no escape. The whispers died, and silence returned. But I felt it. Something was coming. Something unseen. Already here, and I wasn't ready. I wish I could say that everything's over now. That it was just some nightmare, some twisted memory I'd eventually shake off. But the truth is, I can't. The truth is, every night since, the shadows in my room move in ways they shouldn't. The whispers still echo in my head. And sometimes, I swear I can hear them calling my name just barely, right on the edge of sleep. I don't know what I saw that night, or who, or what I saw. But I do know this. Whatever it was, it's still with me.